Good morning, everyone. My name's Martin Roberts. I'm an Assistant Director in the International Sport for Development section here at the Sports Commission. Just before we get started, obviously there's some flight delays with fog this morning, so there's a few people will be a bit late in joining us. So they'll be coming along as they come along. But respecting your time, I want to get started and make a start on the briefing. Well, first of all, as I said, welcome and thank you for your time to come and listen to the briefing. The Pacific Sports Partnerships, the reason why we are doing a briefing combined with the grant application process is that we're aware of the need for context in relation to sport for development. We've been working with a number of sports for the last 4 or 5 years in this area, and within our broader sport for development program a lot longer in some other cases. But I also understand that a number of sports are fairly new to this area, to the area of sport for development. So it is important to have that dialogue and that conversation and get some context around what we're talking about. And I guess to be clear as well in terms of the expectations of the program, what we would like to achieve and our understanding of what you'd like to achieve through the program. So it's very much about supplementing the information that's already provided through the application process. So today we are videoing this session, and that's for the benefit not just of those NSOs and NSODs that can't be here today, but also for our Pacific partners. So this is very much it's a forum meant for Australian-based organisations, but we're videotaping it to get it out on the web for those who can't be here. So today I'm giving it an overview to start with. We also have Rob Regent from the Pacific branch at AusAid, who's going to be speaking more broadly about the aid program with a focus on the Pacific. Some of you may know Rob as an ASC employee. He's on secondment with AusAid at the moment, and fortunate for us, he's working specifically in the development through sport area within the Pacific branch. Also, Alison Simons, who's an Assistant Director at the Sports Commission. She has management responsibility for the Pacific country programs under the Australian Sports Outreach Program. And she'll be speaking later on about context in relation to that part of our program, which is probably one of the most major parts of our initiatives throughout the Pacific. And finally, Nick Cassidy, who probably most importantly can give you the nuts and bolts and the details around the application process and the expectations that we have in relation to engaging with national sporting organisations, regional federations and national federations through part of the Pacific Sports Partnerships. So to make a start, I want to give a bit of context on what sport for development is. A lot of people confuse it up front with sport development. Sport for development, it has been defined by the United Nations, and I'll go into some detail about what that means later on, but essentially it's about using sport, physical activity and play to derive development outcomes. And it's with the intention specifically of using sport as a tool for development. It's different from sport development in that sport development doesn't necessarily identify development outcomes other than those that are specifically related to sport. So it's really about using sport as a platform, and you'll hear these words throughout the presentation this morning, and the more you engage with this particular area, you'll hear the words like tool, platform. It's about using sport to derive development outcomes, and it's something that is really important to get right up front, because that is the area that we are reporting back to government and back to AusAid on, is those development outcomes. So who are the players at the moment in the Australian context? Australian aid, I mentioned AusAid. Australia has a significant national effort in terms of development internationally. It's a $5.1 billion program annually across 34 countries around the world, with a very strong and specific focus on Southeast Asia and the Pacific. They bring to the table significant resources, not only financially but also in terms of expertise, knowledge and in-country capability around the development sector. So that's one arm and a very important arm of this partnership. The other, of course, is Australian sport, which includes you, but I'm talking mainly here in terms of the support for Australian sport. The Australian Government provides $120 million annually to sport, primarily for domestic purposes in terms of high performance and sports development. But we also recognise that the sports industry in Australia has a particular level of expertise, recognition and heritage around sport. And it's those sorts of skills and knowledge and experience that we're drawing on and drawing into this partnership to have an effect in the countries that we're looking at working in. And the final piece of the pie really is the partners themselves. So the area that we work in, we partner obviously with sports, we also partner with governments, and Alison will detail some of the government-to-government work that we do in the Pacific through the country programs, and also non-government organisations. But essentially it's the partner area of the partner area that we're most interested in investing in, because it's that's the interface with the end recipients of the program. So these three areas work in concert, and I guess that's why we call it a partnership. And there's been a partnership approach for a lot of the work we do, not just in the Pacific Sports Partnerships, but also in the country programs, and probably to a slightly lesser extent in the small grants programs that we run. So where does it fit? There are a lot of terms and there are a lot of programs and names, so I wanted to try and give you a little bit of context around how this all fits together. First of all, I mentioned the Australian Sports Outreach Program, and if you like to think of that as the overarching program in sport for development from an Australian government perspective. It is the partnership between AusAid, who provide the funding and support, and the Australian Sports Commission, who manage the programs that sit under the Australian Sports Outreach Program. Above that is the partnership itself between AusAid and the ASC. We have a joint strategy. That joint strategy has just recently been developed and taken on a new iteration. And I guess one of the things I'm going to touch on later on is the specific nature of that joint strategy and what it's calling out in terms of what we're reporting back to government on. And I'll read directly from the grant guidelines, because it is important that, again, just sort of recapping on that point around the development outcomes. So the goals of the program for the Pacific Sports Partnerships are pretty much mirrored in the two major areas under the joint strategy, which is by improving health-related, so saving lives by improving health-related behaviours to reduce the risk of non-communicable diseases, namely diabetes, heart disease, respiratory illness and cancers. The second area is promoting opportunities for all, and we'll go into detail about this, but the second goal is by improving the quality of life for people with disability. This is another key area that we believe, along with AusAid, that sport can have a significant impact on. In the Pacific, Rob will go through some details later on, but 75% of adult deaths in the Pacific are due to non-communicable diseases, preventable diseases. And we believe sport has a significant role to play in that, mainly through the provision of physical activity and changing of health-related behaviours. Disability, likewise. It's been shown that in terms of the developing world, the majority of, if we look at some of the figures, 15% of those of the population of the world considered to be living with a disability, and 80% of those 15% are in developing countries. So it's a significant area, and we believe that sport can have a significant impact on that particular outcome. We will talk briefly about other cross-cutting areas, and you will have seen this in some of the programs that have been developed to date, particularly in terms of gender equality and also social cohesion. So we're calling out these two areas in relation to the impact on non-communicable diseases through physical activity and also on opportunities for people with disability. They're the two headline areas, but also gender and social cohesion are two other areas. But again, most of that is covered in great detail in the supplementary information, but again, to provide some context here. So moving on, the three programs, as I mentioned, that fall underneath the Australian Sports Outreach Program. We have the country programs, and Alison will go into a bit more detail about that. We're looking at about $3 to $4 million a year in terms of government spend on those programs. Pacific Sports Partnerships, which is what we're talking about today, again, around $3 to $4 million per year spent in this area. And the Sport Development Grants, which is just under $300,000 per year, specifically in the Pacific, dealing with a number of countries, looking at engaging with local organisations in country to derive smaller scale development, sport for development outcomes. And feeding into our partnership, we have AusAid, our significant partner in this whole process. Obviously, they provide a significant amount of funding towards these programs, but we also have an engagement with AusAid that provides a significant level of partnership and exchange of information around the programs, guidance frameworks, setting up frameworks and expectations around the way partners will deliver their programs. Child protection, as NSOs will know, is front and centre in a lot of the activity that we do in terms of determining frameworks and standards, and of course tracking, and really what we mean there is reporting, an ability to report on the evidence base that's found out in the field. So I hope that gives a little bit of context of where we sit. It is sometimes a really complicated area because we refer to programs here and programs there, and there's other programs apart from this that we have that aren't necessarily run by the Sports Commission, but are run perhaps by AusAid or other government areas. So trying to just give you a little bit of context specifically about the sport for development side of things. The timeline, just to give you a bit of context on where we've been, noting that the majority of the sports in the room are fairly new to this area. In 2009, the Pacific Sports Partnerships were announced for the first time under the Rudd government. It was under an initiative around engaging youth in the Pacific, and we had selected or pre-selected, the government had chosen 5 sports for us to work with: football, netball, cricket, rugby league and rugby union. All team-based sports with significant capacity to deliver both domestically here, but obviously also in the Pacific region. And it was very much set up as a concept around supporting sports to, I guess, run their activity, but also working with sports to move them towards development outcomes. So it was very much in the infancy of working with sports on deriving development outcomes in the first instance. And it was very much based around a partnership approach.